The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. The protagonist stood frozen, as the judge's gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the room. "This is the end of everything you've worked for," the judge declared. It felt like a personal blow, each word punctuating the shattered pieces of their dream. For a moment, the world seemed to collapse in on itself. Years of struggle, of building something from nothing, of hope and ambition, now seemed meaningless. The ice cream brand, once a beacon of success, was no longer theirs. How could it all end like this, they thought, tears brimming in their eyes. The court was no longer just a place of law. It had become a symbol of defeat. They took everything, they whispered to themselves. What had been a small dream fueled by passion was now a vast chasm of despair. Every effort, every sacrifice, now felt like it had been in vain. As the courtroom emptied, the protagonist was left standing there, not just as a defendant, but as a man stripped of his identity. Outside the courthouse, the protagonist sits alone on a weathered bench, staring at the ground. The sun has started to set, casting long shadows across the street. The chill of the evening air bites at his skin, but it's nothing compared to the cold in his chest. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he mutters, running a hand through his hair in frustration. His dreams, the ice cream empire he built, felt so real, so tangible. And yet here he was, a failure, stripped of everything he had fought for. "How did I get here?" he wonders aloud, his voice trembling. A distant memory flashes in his mind, a simpler time when the world seemed full of possibilities. "I was just trying to give something to people," he thinks, his gaze drifting to the setting sun. But now, the world seems to have turned its back on him. The memories of hope now feel like a cruel joke. The protagonist walks down the street, the weight of the day's events dragging him down. His steps are slow, hesitant, as if he's unsure of where he's going. The hustle of the city continues around him, but he feels disconnected, as though he's walking through life in a fog. How could this happen? He wonders, each footfall a reminder of his failure. "I thought I was building something bigger than myself." The faces of passers-by blur as he continues forward, his mind racing with doubt and anger. He thinks of the people who believed in him, who trusted him, and how he let them all down. But it's the betrayal, the silent, calculated betrayal, that stings the most. "I should have known," he whispers to himself, the words carrying a bitter edge. But it's too late for regrets now. The protagonist arrives at a small cafe, his favorite spot, the one place that always gave him comfort. He pushes open the door, greeted by the familiar scent of coffee and pastries. For a moment, he almost forgets the world outside, but then the weight of everything crashes back into his mind. Sitting down, he stares at his cup, the steam rising, but his thoughts are clouded with doubt. "I should have seen this coming," he mutters, his hand gripping the porcelain cup. He remembers the early days of the business, how his heart beat faster with each new idea. Back then there was a sense of certainty. But now, it feels like he's been chasing a dream that was never his to begin with. The betrayal haunts him, every word the betrayer spoke echoing in his mind. "It was never mine," he thinks bitterly. "They always had control." He sighs, a deep, heavy breath, feeling the enormity of his loss settle over him like a thick fog. The future that once seemed so clear is now a tangled mess of regret. The evening wears on, and the protagonist walks back to his apartment. His steps are slower now, each one more reluctant than the last. He reaches for his keys, his hand trembling as he unlocks the door. Inside, the apartment feels eerily quiet. There's no warmth here, no sense of home. Just a space filled with memories of a life he can no longer recognize. "This was supposed to be my victory," he says softly, stepping inside. The walls, once filled with inspiration and dreams, now feel like a prison. His eyes fall on an old photograph on the mantel, a picture from the early days of his business, when everything seemed so possible. He stares at the image, the memories flooding back. It was a simpler time. Back then, He believed the world was full of endless opportunities. Now, the only thing he can feel is the crushing weight of failure. How could they betray me like this? He wonders aloud, his voice barely a whisper, lost in the empty room. Weeks have passed since the devastating court ruling, but the protagonist's life feels like it's stuck in the same moment. Walking through a busy street, everything around him moves in a blur, yet he stands still, frozen in time. The city has continued, but he has not. I thought I was on the right path, he thinks bitterly, but with each step, doubt gnaws at him. He's constantly haunted by the words of the betrayer. The man who once promised to stand by him, now the architect of his downfall. I trusted him, he whispers under his breath, the pain in his voice, unmistakable. How could he have been so blind? He once believed that hard work and loyalty were all it took to succeed. Now it feels like the world is a game, and he was never meant to play. He looks around, trying to find something familiar, something that will anchor him. But there's nothing left. The city, once full of opportunity, now feels suffocating, and all he wants is to escape. That night, the protagonist lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts are relentless, tearing him apart. What did I miss? He wonders, replaying every conversation, every moment with the betrayer. Each memory is a knife twisting in his heart. His mind flashes back to the early days, when everything felt full of promise. I built something good, he thinks, but now that very thing feels tainted, destroyed by someone he called a friend. A wave of frustration hits him, and he slams his fist into the mattress. Why did I trust him? He says aloud, his voice thick with regret. The silence of the night envelops him, and for a moment, he feels completely alone. In that silence, the truth comes rushing in, filling the space. The betrayal was never about business. It was personal, and that cuts deeper than anything else. The next morning, the protagonist sits at a small diner, nursing a cup of coffee, staring out the window. It's a quiet moment, but his thoughts are still loud. I used to think this was my destiny, he muses, the words escaping his lips before he can stop them. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, now feels hollow. The world outside continues. Cars pass by, people walk by without a second glance. But inside, the protagonist feels like he's fading into the background. Is this the end? He wonders. The coffee in front of him grows cold, just like the warmth in his chest. He picks up the cup, holding it, but not drinking. His mind flashes to his younger self, full of hope and excitement. That person feels like a stranger now, someone he can barely recognize. The weight of the past, combined with the betrayal, crushes him. Later that day, the protagonist walks into the office, the one place he used to find purpose. But now, the space feels foreign to him. The walls, once adorned with his dreams and achievements, now seem like a cage. How did it all come to this? He wonders aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. The room is quiet, except for the soft hum of a computer and the distant sound of footsteps. He sits at his desk, staring at the empty chair across from him, where the betrayer once sat. It feels like a ghost now, the memories of their partnership, once full of promise, now twisted. I thought we were building something together, he thinks. The office, with its sleek furniture and polished surfaces, seems empty without the camaraderie they once shared. The protagonist picks up a pen, twirling it between his fingers, but he can't focus. His mind is elsewhere, lost in the realization that everything he built is now out of his reach. That evening, the protagonist takes a long walk through the city. The streets are quieter now, the glow of streetlights casting soft halos on the pavement. I have to keep going, he tells himself, but the words feel hollow. But what for? He questions. Every step seems to take him farther from the person he once was. The city, once a place full of possibilities, now feels like a maze, each turn leading him further into darkness. He passes familiar streets, but they look different now. The world around him feels distant, like he's living in someone else's life. As he walks, he can't shake the feeling that he's lost something more than just a business. I don't know who I am anymore, he thinks, his mind spinning. The weight of everything that's happened is too much to carry, but he knows he has no choice but to move forward. A few days after the betrayal, the protagonist is sitting at a cafe, staring into his cup of coffee. He hasn't been able to focus on much since the court ruling. The betrayal still stings, deeper than he's willing to admit. Why did he do it, he thinks, unable to make sense of it all. His mind is full of unanswered questions. The once strong bond with the betrayer now feels like a lie, a cruel mirage that vanishes as soon as he reaches for it. "I thought we were building something together," he whispers, the words heavy with sorrow. The emptiness of his coffee cup mirrors the hollow feeling inside him. His fingers nervously drum against the table as he replays the events over and over. In the silence of the cafe, he feels more alone than ever, as if everyone else has moved on with their lives, and he's left behind, stuck in the past. Every moment feels like a reminder of the life he once had, now slipping further out of his reach. The protagonist steps into the office for the first time since the betrayal. His heart races as he walks past the desk where the betrayer once sat. The office, once a place of collaboration and hope, now feels cold and hostile. "It's like everything I worked for was never mine," he thinks, his hand brushing across the surface of the desk. The glass windows offer a view of the city, but he can't bring himself to appreciate the view anymore. "I never saw it coming," he whispers, staring at the empty chair across from him. The reality of the betrayal is still too fresh. Every document on his desk, every item on the shelves, feels like a mockery of the trust he once had. He takes a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but it's impossible. The weight of what has happened presses down on him like a physical force. This is no longer his space, no longer his dream. The walls that once held ambition now feel like a prison. Late that night, the protagonist stumbles upon an old letter. It's from the early days of his business, filled with the dreams and ambitions that once fueled him. He sits in his small apartment, reading the letter aloud to himself, his voice quiet and heavy with nostalgia. "This was supposed to be bigger than me," he remembers thinking when he first started. The letter spoke of hope, of overcoming obstacles, and of believing in something greater. But now, in the quiet of the room, it feels like a distant memory. "I've lost myself," he whispers, his voice breaking as he struggles to come to terms with the fact that everything has changed. The dream that once seemed so clear now feels blurry, overshadowed by the betrayal and the broken trust. The words from the letter seem to mock him now, reminding him of the person he used to be before everything fell apart. The next day, the protagonist runs into an old friend at the corner of the street. They exchange pleasantries, but the conversation quickly turns to business. "How's the company doing?" the friend asks casually. The protagonist hesitates, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. "I don't know," he admits, his voice heavy. "Everything's changed." The friend looks at him with concern, sensing that something is wrong, but the protagonist doesn't elaborate. "I just need to figure things out," he says, forcing a weak smile. But inside, he knows the truth. He's been running from the reality of the situation. The betrayal has shaken him to his core, and he is unsure how to move forward. The friend's gaze lingers for a moment longer, but they don't push. As the protagonist walks away, he feels a strange sense of shame. Even his closest friends can see the cracks in his facade. That night, as the protagonist lies in bed, he can't shake the feeling of helplessness. The clock ticks loudly in the silence of the room, each passing second feeling like an eternity. "I've lost control," he thinks bitterly, his mind racing. He once believed in his ability to change the world, to overcome any challenge. But now, he feels small and powerless. "How could I let this happen?" The betrayal has shattered his confidence, and he's left with nothing but self-doubt. The bed feels cold, and his thoughts swirl as the hours pass. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," he wonders, his voice barely a whisper. The person he was, the person full of hope and ambition, feels like a distant memory. All that remains now is a man struggling to find his way through the rubble of his shattered dreams. Days blur into one another, and the protagonist feels himself slipping further into despair. But something shifts when he receives an unexpected message, a cryptic text from an unknown number, I know what really happened. His fingers tremble as he reads the message over and over. Who could it be? Who knew the truth? Is this a joke? He wonders, unsure whether to ignore it or respond. His mind races with possibilities. Could it be someone from the past? Someone still loyal to him? Or is it just another cruel trick? I need to know the truth, he thinks, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. The betrayal, though painful, was only one piece of the puzzle. The real question now is, what if there's more to the story than he realized? His entire world had been upended, but could this message be the first step toward reclaiming it? The text offers no answers, just more questions. But for the first time in a long while, the protagonist feels a spark of hope. Unable to let go of the mystery, the protagonist begins investigating. He spends hours going through old contacts, business records, and even his personal files. Nothing makes sense. Then, a breakthrough. An email from years ago, a conversation that had been buried. The message was from the betrayer, but it was sent to a third party. The subject line reads, "Finalizing the deal." His heart sinks as he reads further. What is this? He asks aloud. It's clear now that the betrayer had been planning something all along, even before the protagonist had been aware. The email describes a scheme to take control of the business, to push the protagonist out of the picture. The betrayal wasn't just a coincidence. It was premeditated. The reality hits him hard. I was never in control, he thinks bitterly. His hands shake as he sits back in his chair, the weight of the truth settling in. Everything he had believed was a lie. The protagonist confronts the betrayer. The meeting takes place in a cold, empty conference room. The space that once symbolized their partnership now feels like a battlefield. The betrayer sits across from him, calm and composed, while the protagonist is filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. You knew all along, didn't you? The protagonist asks, his voice shaking with emotion. The betrayer smiles faintly, but it's a smile that no longer feels genuine. I had to do what was best for the company, the betrayer responds, his voice smooth. But there's a flicker of something behind his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or regret. You were never meant to lead this, he continues. The words hit like a punch. The protagonist is stunned, his mind reeling. You used me, he says, his voice low and dangerous. This was never about the business, was it? It was always about power. The betrayer's smile falters, but he doesn't back down. The truth is out in the open now, and everything the protagonist believed about their relationship has been shattered. The confrontation leaves the protagonist shaken. He walks out of the building, the weight of the revelation settling on his shoulders. The world outside feels colder, less forgiving. What now? He thinks, unsure of where to go from here. He's lost everything, the business, the trust, and his sense of identity. The betrayal had been the catalyst, but now the true loss is apparent, the destruction of everything he believed in. As he walks aimlessly through the city streets, he's struck by how much has changed. The streets are still busy, the world still turning, but he feels like he's been left behind. His phone buzzes again, and for a split second he wonders if it's another message, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. But it's just an old friend checking in. The world continues, oblivious to his pain, and the realization stings. I've lost everything, he thinks, a tear slipping down his cheek. He's not sure where to go from here, but for the first time he's considering something drastic. Back in his apartment, the protagonist stands in front of a mirror. He's lost. The man staring back at him is a stranger, someone consumed by betrayal, regret, and uncertainty. Who am I now? He asks, his voice hollow. The reflection in the mirror is no longer the person who started the company, who built it from the ground up. That man is gone, replaced by someone who feels broken, empty. His reflection stares back at him, lifeless. I can't let this be the end, he whispers, a new resolve beginning to take shape. The weight of his past mistakes still lingers, but he knows he has to make a choice. I can either disappear, he thinks, or I can fight back. The man in the mirror is still him, but he has to rediscover what he's capable of. The future is uncertain, but for the first time he feels a flicker of hope. The protagonist knows what he has to do. He walks into the boardroom, this time with a clear purpose. The betrayer is there, surrounded by allies, ready to take full control. This ends today, the protagonist thinks, his resolve hardening. His footsteps echo in the silence of the room as he steps forward, his presence commanding attention. "I'm not backing down," he says firmly. The room falls silent, the tension palpable. He confronts the betrayer with the cold, hard truth. "You didn't win," the protagonist declares, his voice steady. The betrayer's smug smile falters as the protagonist presents his evidence. The documents, the emails, the proof of the conspiracy. "You thought I was finished," the protagonist continues, his voice rising with confidence. "But you underestimated me." The room shifts, and for the first time, the protagonist feels like he's in control. The betrayer, caught off guard, tries to deny it, but it's too late. The tide has turned. The boardroom erupts in chaos as the protagonist's evidence sinks in. The betrayer, now exposed, tries to salvage his reputation, but it's futile. The protagonist feels a surge of triumph. This is it, he thinks, but even as he stands victorious, the weight of the past still lingers. "I've reclaimed what's mine," he tells himself, but it doesn't bring the satisfaction he expected. There's no real victory in revenge. The battle is over, but the war within him is far from finished. What now? He wonders, as he watches the betrayer try to salvage his position. The protagonist knows that winning back the business is only part of the journey. The real challenge is rebuilding himself. As the chaos subsides, the protagonist takes a deep breath, his hands still shaking slightly, though no longer from fear. The weight of what he has just done begins to sink in. The betrayer has been exposed, but the victory feels hollow. "I fought back, but what did it really cost me?" he thinks, his mind clouded with conflicting emotions. The business is his again, but at what price? The relationships he once cherished, the trust he once had, are all irreparably damaged. He watches as the betrayer is escorted out, his shoulders slumped, his world crumbling. This should feel like a victory, the protagonist thinks, but it feels like the end of something much bigger. As the room quiets down, the protagonist's mind drifts to the people who have always believed in him, the ones who never doubted his ability to rise above it all. "I'm not just doing this for me," he whispers, looking around at the empty room. "I'm doing this for them too." In the aftermath, the protagonist sits alone in his office, the blinds pulled down, keeping the world at bay. The adrenaline has faded, and the silence is overwhelming. He looks around the familiar space, but it no longer feels like his. This place, this business, it doesn't feel the same anymore, he thinks. The walls that once housed his dreams now feel suffocating, like they're closing in on him. "I've taken back control, but what do I have left?" he wonders. For a moment, he entertains the thought of walking away entirely, leaving it all behind. But as quickly as the thought comes, it vanishes. "This is still mine," he says firmly, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair. He's not done yet. The journey isn't over. He has to rebuild not just the company, but his own life, piece by piece. It won't be easy, but it's the only way forward. "I can't let this define me," he whispers to himself. The protagonist steps outside into the cool evening air, the city stretching out before him. The weight of the past few days has left him drained, but there's a spark of something new in his chest. This isn't over, he thinks, the resolve in his voice steady. "I'm not going to walk away." He looks up at the city skyline, the lights flickering like stars, each one representing a possibility, a choice. The future is uncertain, but for the first time, he feels like he can face it. "I'll rebuild, step by step," he vows, his voice filled with quiet determination. He's lost much, but there's still hope. "I may have been knocked down, but I'll rise again," he thinks, his steps steady as he moves forward into the unknown. The city feels alive again, its energy matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. "This is just the beginning," he whispers to himself, a sense of peace settling over him. The real work starts now. Months later, the protagonist walks through his office, now thriving. I've rebuilt everything, but who am I now? He wonders. Success isn't as fulfilling as he expected. I thought it was the end goal, but it was never about the business. The weight of the past still lingers, but he's learned that true peace isn't found in what's built, but in letting go of the past. He's ready to move forward, but he knows the journey isn't over. It's just beginning. At a meeting with colleagues, the protagonist acknowledges their support. I couldn't have done this without you. We're stronger now, one replies. But it's not just about business, it's about resilience and growth. I'm not the same person, he admits, a quiet smile emerging. His journey has taught him that the real strength lies in personal growth, not in the business success he thought would define him. Later, the protagonist stands by his office window, watching the city below. I'm not just surviving anymore, he thinks. The weight of his past, the betrayal, and the loss have given way to peace. I found something I didn't expect, a sense of freedom, he realizes, his mind clear. The city seems vast, yet he feels grounded, ready to embrace whatever the future holds with newfound hope. The protagonist walks through quiet city streets, feeling an overwhelming sense of release. I've been chasing success for so long, he reflects. But now I realize it's about living in the moment. The city around him moves in a blur, but he walks with purpose. I can't control everything, he acknowledges, but I can control how I move forward. He's found peace in letting go of control. On a quiet beach at sunrise, the protagonist feels the true freedom of letting go. I've learned that you can't control everything, he thinks, watching the waves crash. But you can choose how to live. The peaceful morning air fills his lungs, and for the first time, he feels whole. I'm enough, he whispers to the rising sun, embracing the clarity that comes with self-acceptance. The protagonist stands on a rooftop, looking over the city. I've built something, but it's not the empire I imagined, he reflects. It was never about what I built, but who I became. The city glows beneath him, but peace settles in his heart. He's not the man he once was, but he's finally at peace with who he's become. In a meeting, the protagonist thanks his colleagues. We've been through so much, but now we're stronger. He reflects, I'm not the same person. The journey was about growth, not just success. His eyes meet theirs, filled with mutual respect. Walking down the hall, the protagonist feels at peace. This is not just about surviving anymore, he thinks. It's about living. The city outside his office no longer feels like a burden, but a space full of possibility. The protagonist stands on a quiet street at night. I've been chasing success for so long, he thinks. But now, it's about the moments in between. The city hums around him, but he walks forward, free from past burden. On a beach at sunrise, the protagonist feels the freedom of letting go. I've learned I can't control everything, he thinks. But I can choose how to live. The waves crash, and for the first time, he's at peace with who he is.